James Cameron might arguably be the most profitable movie director of all time when it comes to pure box office sales. Well, next to this guy, of course. But success for Cameron wasn't always guaranteed.
I almost bailed on being a filmmaker. And the thing that kept me in the game was the possibility of the Avatar universe reaching a lot of people with a persistent message and reaction on part of the audience to maybe fight for and protect.
A lot of his films were filled with extra massive risks, ballooning budgets, development of new technology, and even near career-ending setbacks. And yet, Cameron managed to prevail through every overwhelming circumstance. In this video, we're breaking down James Cameron's entire filmography, from his early misfires to billion-dollar blockbusters, taking a look at the budget, box office numbers, critic scores, and whether or not the movie was truly profitable. James Cameron's debut as a director was far from glamorous. Cameron wasn't hired to direct Piranha 2 as some legendary visionary director. He was hired as a replacement for the original filmmaker. The studio had already greenlit the project and placed it under the hands of Ovidio Assanitis, who was notorious for keeping tight creative control. Cameron was brought in with the expectation that he'd essentially be a director in name only. But from the very start, Cameron was at odds with the production. He clashed with Assanitis over nearly everything.
From day one, was not a great relationship. I mean, my first choice was not James Cameron.
At one point, Cameron was reportedly locked out of the editing room entirely, with the producer taking full control of the final cut. The production was chaotic, plagued by cheap effects, communication issues, and a general lack of cohesion. Cameron later disowned the film, saying he never considered it his real debut. This unofficial directorial debut had a modest budget of around $300,000, but it barely made a splash at the box office, grossing just under $400,000. It marked the only true financial failure in his directing career. The Spawning sits at an abysmal 5% critic rating, which is just a tad bit higher than what they would have rated it if they never even saw the movie in the first place. Interestingly, despite this film being a total mess behind the scenes and flopping at the box office, Piranha 2 played a crucial role in Cameron's career, because it was during this project that Cameron claims he had the fever dream that later inspired The Terminator.
Is it true that you thought of the theme, or that the theme of Terminator came to you in a dream?
It wasn't so much a theme as a kind of seminal image. I was in Rome. I was broke. I had a high fever, and I was just having these weird dreams. And I had this image of this kind of chrome skeleton, death image coming out of a fire, kind of phoenix-like. And I just got up and sketched it. And then around the nucleus of that, I started to create a story and sort of backfill. Okay, what is it? Where did it come from?
This financial stumble would light a fire in Cameron. So while Piranha 2 was a creative disaster, it accidentally helped ignite the career of one of the most successful directors in cinematic history. His next film would be a complete game-changer. The Terminator tells the story of a cyborg assassin sent from a dystopian future to kill Sarah Connor, whose future son will lead a resistance against machines. The main theme of The Terminator revolves around the conflict between fate and free will, while also acknowledging the potential dangers of unchecked technological advancement. Specifically, the film explores the idea of people trying desperately to alter their predetermined destiny, and the duality of human nature, showcasing both compassion and destruction. Cameron wrote the script for The Terminator and sold it for only $1 to Gail Hurd, who would later become his wife, with the condition that he be allowed to direct the film when it goes into production. Cameron sold the rights to the Terminator script not because he undervalued it, rather it was a strategic move to protect his vision. Cameron was an unknown filmmaker at the time, and no one in Hollywood was eager to let a rookie direct a big fancy sci-fi action movie. By selling the rights to Gail, who was already an established producer at the time, it gave her the legal ownership needed to shop the project around with Cameron attached as director, which is something the studios would not have allowed if they bought the script outright. Studios were initially hesitant, but Orion Pictures eventually agreed to finance the film.
The Terminator was my first film as director, and we didn't have much money, and I couldn't afford a top designer, so I just designed all the models and the effects myself because I was basically unemployed and I was the cheapest resource available.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally considered for the role of Kyle Reese before being cast as the Terminator. This low-budget sci-fi thriller, made for just $6.4 million, became a cultural phenomenon. Thanks to its innovative storytelling and iconic performance by Arnold, it grossed over $78 million worldwide, which is more than 12 times its production budget. Even after accounting for marketing and theater cuts, it was a financial triumph. It also holds a perfect 100% critic rating, gradually earning cult status as a groundbreaking action film. It not only redefined the genre, It catapulted James Cameron into entirely new levels of praise and cinematic influence. And with that success, Cameron proved he could turn modest resources into massive returns. So naturally, he set his sights on something bigger. While completing pre-production of the first Terminator, James Cameron discussed the possibility of working on a sequel to Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien. Cameron was a huge fan of the film and was heavily interested in crafting a sequel and entered a self-imposed seclusion to brainstorm a concept for Alien 2.
Here I am as this ridiculous fanboy turned director, now wanting to do the sequel to Ridley Scott's much vaunted Alien film, and everybody tried to talk me out of it. They said, well, don't do that, because anything that's good in your movie will be attributed to Ridley, and anything that's bad will be attributed to you. It's a no-win scenario. And I said, but I really want to do it. It'll be cool.
You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back.
After 4 days, Cameron produced an initial 45-page treatment, although management changes at Fox resulted in the film being put on hiatus, as they felt that Alien had not generated enough profit to warrant a sequel. While filming The Terminator, Cameron wrote 90 pages for Aliens, and although the script was far from finished, Fox was impressed and told him that if The Terminator was a success, then he would be able to direct Aliens. Following the massive box office numbers of the Terminator movie, Cameron and his partner Gail Hurd were given approval to direct and produce the sequel to Alien.
Oftentimes, projects that are sequels are really remakes. And in this case, Aliens is a continuation of Alien. However, I think it goes beyond it in terms of scope.
Cameron was enticed by the opportunity to create a new world and opted not to follow the same formula as Alien, but to create a worthy combat sequel focusing more on terror than on horror. Sigourney Weaver, who played Ellen Ripley in Alien, had doubts about the project. But after meeting Cameron, she expressed interest in revisiting her character. However, Fox refused to sign a contract with Weaver over a payment dispute and asked Cameron to write a story excluding Ellen Ripley. But Cameron refused this request on the grounds that Fox had indicated that Weaver would be involved. With Cameron's persistence, Fox signed the contract and Weaver obtained a salary of $1 million, a sum which was 30 times what she was paid for the first film.
It's an odyssey this woman makes, through a lot of personal hardship and trauma, through a nightmare and out of it. And that's what it is for me.
Cameron's Aliens follows Weaver's character Ellen Ripley as she returns to the planet where her crew encountered the hostile alien creature, this time accompanied by a unit of colonial marines. With a budget of $18.5 million, Cameron's sequel to Ridley Scott's Alien amped up the action and suspense. It went on to gross $183 million globally, nearly 10 times the budget. Considering the average return needed for profitability is about 2.5 to 3 times the budget to cover marketing and branding cost, Aliens was a smash hit. It has an impressive 94% critic rating. That's near universal acclaim for a sequel that redefined its genre. Cameron was now officially Hollywood's sci-fi golden child, but he wasn't content staying in space. He decided to bring things down to Earth with a deep dive into nature's mysterious oceans. The Abyss follows a team of deep-sea oil drillers and Navy SEALs sent to recover a sunken submarine. While exploring the depths of the ocean, they encounter weird, glowing underwater thingies that seem to be of alien origin. The mission soon spirals into a struggle for survival, both against the pressure of the deep and against one of the SEALs who becomes unstable. At its core, the film is about humanity, communication, and the unknown. It blends Cold War tension with science fiction mystery and philosophical depth. This was one of the most ambitious productions of its time. The Abyss was shot primarily in a massive specially built underwater set inside a half-finished nuclear power plant in South Carolina. Cameron had built a massive underwater set in the containment unit of an abandoned nuclear reactor, filling it with 7.5 million gallons of water. He had trained his cast to withstand a shoot that would take place largely underwater, requiring them to be in scuba gear for hours and hours at a time. He was also attempting to revolutionize special effects, with elaborate use of the then unheard of, soon-to-be revolutionary CGI. The Abyss was an unprecedented production, and it came with unprecedented problems. The Abyss wound up being one of the most troubled Hollywood films of all time, nearly killing Cameron and some of his cast in the process.
The Abyss was a tough shoot on a lot of levels. It was physically very exhausting. Heavy helmets, heavy backpacks, heavy weights.
This ambitious underwater epic had a budget of $43 million, a significant leap for Cameron. It pulled in $90 million worldwide, not a total flop, but not a blockbuster either. After taking out marketing and distribution cost, the margins must have been razor thin. The poor performance of the movie was only made worse as the press and movie critics focused on the troubled nature of the shoot. The movie still had an impressive rating of 89%, with many critics admiring its ambition and groundbreaking effects. Even if the story divided some audiences, the film was a technological marvel, and it laid the groundwork for what came next, the biggest sequel in sci-fi history. Set more than a decade after the original, The Terminator 2 flips the script. This time, the Terminator, played by Arnold, is the good guy, reprogrammed and sent back to protect young John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance. A far more advanced and dangerous Terminator, the liquid metal T-1000, is sent to kill him, while Sarah Connor, now a hardened warrior preparing for the apocalypse, escapes from a mental institution to reunite with her son and help stop Judgment Day. It's a story of redemption, sacrifice, and humanity's ability to change its fate. This was the most expensive movie ever made at the time. Cameron reunited with Arnold and brought in industrial light and magic to pioneer groundbreaking special effects. The liquid metal effects of the T-1000 were revolutionary, using advanced morphing tech that laid the groundwork for future CGI-heavy blockbusters. As its name suggests, the T-1000 is more advanced than the T-800. Its most distinctive ability is that it can perfectly imitate the appearance of any person or surface that it touches, which made the threat level for this film a million times awesome. However, although it could transform into anything, the T-1000's primary form throughout the film was a semi-gorgeous evil-looking fella, wearing the same uniform of a cop that he had killed immediately after arriving from the future. With a groundbreaking budget of $100 million, this sequel pushed special effects to new heights. It grossed over $520 million globally, more than 5 times its production budget. Especially when you include home video and merchandising, it was an absolute blockbuster hit. It quintupled its budget in box office revenue alone and also dominated merchandising. Terminator 2 has a critic rating of 91%, which is truly phenomenal because it's an extremely rare case for a sequel to not only live up to the hype, but surpass it in every way. The Academy also took notice as the film went home with 4 Oscars, including Best Visual Effects. The scale of the movie, including helicopter stunts and highway chases, pushed filmmaking limits. Judgment Day is yet another Cameron masterpiece, and although it may not be as lean as its predecessor, it still has a great deal of imagination and innovative effects to make up for it. It carefully walks a tightrope, working well as a family film, while also never abandoning its horror roots.
Fortunately, I was working with really good people that I had worked with before, and we were able to go beyond, which was great, especially with the special effects.
And with that monster success, Cameron proved he could handle massive budgets and still deliver. For his next project, Cameron was going to take on a globe-trotting spy adventure concept film with a slight comedic twist. True Lies is a genre-bending action comedy about Harry Tasker, a secret agent who pretends to be a boring computer salesman to his wife Helen. But when he discovers she's dead bored with her life, he inadvertently gets her involved in his espionage world while trying to stop a terrorist group with nuclear ambitions. The movie balances explosive action set pieces with hilarious domestic drama and mistaken identity. Cameron reteamed with Arnold Schwarzenegger for the 3rd time, and the movie was another big-budget gamble, filled with over-the-top action. Arnold was at the height of his box office popularity, and he was stretching his comedic muscles in a way he hadn't really done before. However, Jamie Lee Curtis was the real star when it comes to the humor of this movie. Her sober and unfulfilled housewife role is a perfect bit of gleeful misdirection for when she transforms into a sultry spy. Curtis clicks with the material immediately and plays every moment with utmost sincerity and confidence. I personally love the chemistry between her and Arnold, especially when the movie allows them to sit with each other and bounce dialogue back and forth. Their dynamic works effortlessly and also offers some of the best moments in the film. If you're grading True Lies purely on its action spectacle, it's safe to say that it more than holds up. Cameron was able to use his colossal clout to demand extravagant action set pieces that are still inarguably impressive. If Cameron is going to do an action scene, he's going to go all in. Plus, with this being in the 90s, so much of the action is done in camera, or with as many practical effects as possible. This action comedy bad guy type thriller had a hefty budget of $120 million, but it delivered, grossing nearly $379 million worldwide. Even with its large marketing spend, the film brought in roughly triple its cost, which is comfortably profitable by Hollywood standards. Despite a high budget, it tripled its production cost at the box office and did even better in home sales. It was also the first movie to cost over $100 million at that time and still be a commercial success, proving Cameron could make blockbusters at any scale.
It should work on all levels. It should be visual, acoustic, musical, emotional. And I don't know if humor is an emotion. I guess it is. Should be funny in the right places.
And with a critic rating of 70%, Cameron was preparing to set sail on a cinematic journey that would shake the world. The Titanic was the largest ocean liner ever made at the time, and it was thought to be unsinkable, but that turned out to be far from the case. There were tons of factors into how and why it sank, but the unfortunate fact is, it did sink, and a great number of people lost their lives in the disaster. But all of those historical records and fancy metadata don't seem to quite make the tragedy feel as real as James Cameron's Titanic. Very few films are as universally engaging and captivating, but Titanic happens to be one of those few. If the love story was all there was to the film, this might make for a mediocre romance. But we all know the real story is the disaster of the ship. Titanic is a sweeping romantic tragedy film that centers on the sinking of the Titanic ship. James Cameron wrote and directed the movie, which also starred Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. The film follows the story of Rose Bukater, a wealthy young woman engaged to a controlling aristocrat, and Jack Dawson, a free-spirited artist from a working-class background. They meet and eventually fall in love during the ship's maiden voyage, only for their story to collide with one of history's greatest maritime disasters. The film flashes between present-day exploration of Titanic's wreck and the vivid retelling of its final days, balancing love, class conflict, and historical spectacle. Cameron's obsession with detail led him to dive to the real Titanic wreck multiple times. He insisted on building a nearly full-scale replica of the ship, which ultimately became the most expensive and ambitious set in film history at the time. The shoot was very brutal, plagued by water-related illnesses and freezing temperatures that hospitalized several crew members. Cameron's perfectionism pushed everyone to the edge, but the result was jaw-dropping realism. Titanic might arguably be one of the greatest films ever made, a timeless story that still captivates the audience because it takes its time to make you believe. The movie lets you sit in it without rushing, building every moment brick by brick. It takes its time to make you believe in love and compassion as you ease into the calm before the storm. And just when it feels safe to completely believe in the fairy tale, everything shifts. Suddenly, all the wide smiles, warm emotions, and happy faces tragically turn to tears and a strong sense of despair and desperation. Every second becomes a fight and every decision feels final. But through it all, the love between Jack and Kate only grows stronger, but not in a dramatic or corny type of way, but in small, genuine, but desperate ways. What was once a dream voyage turned into a nightmare, and for Jack and Rose, a race against death. That's what Titanic does way better than most romantic movies. It builds something beautiful, then breaks it in front of you, and makes you feel every single step of it. This film almost sank under its $200 million budget, the most expensive movie ever made at the time. Studios were panicking. But when it hit theaters, Titanic absolutely destroyed the box office, earning over $2.2 billion in its original run. Even after subtracting marketing and distribution, it was a historic moneymaker, one of the most profitable films of all time. Despite early press predicting it would bomb, Titanic became the highest-grossing film of all time, until Cameron broke his own record with Avatar a few years later. Titanic also went on to win 11 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Its massive success was extremely unprecedented, and the breakthrough also extended to DVD sales and an iconic soundtrack. Titanic currently has a critic rating of 88%, with some criticizing the melodrama, and others professing their love for the film, bestowing it as a cinematic masterpiece.
Well, look, I mean, the making of the film was one huge adversity, and the hardest part of it was the sort of the press and the media having great sport with telling the world what idiots we were and how over budget it was and how it could never make a dime and all of that. I mean, that was all hard for us to deal with when we were trying to make the film.
More than just financially successful, it solidified Cameron's dual identity as both a visionary filmmaker and a real-world explorer. And just as he dove into history's most famous wreck, Cameron was preparing for his next journey, one that would take him not to the past, but to the depths of Earth's alien oceans. Set in the mid-22nd century, Avatar follows paraplegic ex-Marine Jake Sully as he's sent to the Pandora, where humans are mining a valuable mineral called unobtainium. Using an avatar body scientifically linked to his genetic code, Jake integrates into the Na'vi tribe, learning their ways and falling in love with Neytiri. As tensions rise between the colonizing humans and the Na'vi, Jake switches sides to defend the alien world from destruction. The story explores themes of imperialism, environmentalism, and spiritual connection to nature. Cameron had the idea for Avatar since the 90s, but had to wait for technology to catch up. He invented a new type of performance capture system that recorded actors' facial expressions in extreme detail and used a virtual camera system to see all the CGI environments in real time. The heart of Avatar centers around conflict, but not just between the humans and the Na'vi, but between two completely different worldviews. On one side, you have exploitation, a mindset that sees land as a resource, people as obstacles, and profit as the ultimate goal. On the other hand, we have harmony, a way of life rooted in connection, balance, and reverence for all living things. It's a powerful allegory for colonization. The Na'vi represent indigenous cultures whose homes and sacred lands are constantly threatened by outsiders chasing wealth. The film draws clear parallels to our own world, from the Amazon rainforest being ransacked for minerals to the historical displacement of native people. Jake Sully's journey isn't only political or environmental, it's deeply personal. As he learns the Na'vi way of life, he doesn't just fall in love with Neytiri. He falls in love with the world she protects, and that love becomes the driving force behind his transformation. It took 4 years to make and rewrite the rules for digital filmmaking, and unsurprisingly, the film turned out to be a visual masterpiece, which seemed very futuristic at the time. For a movie almost entirely composed of visual effects, there are very few noticeable flaws in the CGI of the film. The visual effects were created by Weta Digital, a New Zealand-based visual effects company that also worked on The Lord of the Rings and the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. Made on a budget of $237 million, with another $150 million for marketing, Avatar had the weight of the world on its shoulders, but it exceeded all expectations, becoming the first film to cross $2.9 billion in global revenue. It returned more than 10 times its production budget and remained the highest-grossing film of all time for years, passing his own film Titanic, which had previously held the record. Avatar currently has a solid critic rating of 81%, with some critics calling its story too familiar, while others say that the world-building and visual spectacle were unmatched. Its tech innovations also reshaped how Hollywood approached blockbuster filmmaking.
I finally wanted to make a movie where I could use all these visual ideas that I'd had percolating for years, but I also wanted to tell a story that was about where we're going as a human species. What our relationship with nature is, and how we don't respect nature, and how we tend to destroy it, and what the end result of that process will be.
After redefining cinematic technology and box office standards, Cameron wasn't done yet. 13 years later, James Cameron brought us back to Pandora. But this time, it wasn't the forest calling. This time, it was the ocean. Avatar: The Way of Water shifts the story from the trees to the tides, and from survival to legacy. Set more than a decade after the first film, Jake Sully is no longer the outsider. He's now a husband, a father, and a Na'vi clan leader. However, peace doesn't last too long, cause the evil human bad guys are back again, even more ruthless than ever. Jake is forced to flee with his family to a new home among the Metkayina, an ocean-dwelling Na'vi tribe. If the first Avatar was about discovery and learning to love a world you were sent to conquer, The Way of Water is about legacy, and how far you're willing to go to protect your family and preserve a culture that's constantly under threat. It's about adaptation, about learning to live in harmony with unfamiliar environments, and honoring the rhythm of nature. For this Avatar, Cameron and his team developed new filmmaking technology to capture the actors' performances underwater, something that had never been done before in the history of cinema. This sequel came with a massive price tag, with a production budget of $460 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made. Despite the high stakes, Cameron once again delivered. The film grossed over $2.3 billion worldwide, becoming the third highest-grossing film of all time. Ancillary revenues like merchandise, streaming, and future theme park integration only further boost its long-term value. Avatar 2 has a critic rating of 76%, with some critics complaining that the undersea world just looked like a random gigantic screensaver, and others praising Cameron's storytelling and some of the technologies and techniques that his team had created in order to bring the movie to life. Whichever side of the aisle you stand with, you can't deny that James Cameron goes above and beyond to push the bar in every film that he makes.
I think there are a lot of lot of good filmmakers out there, and a lot of good filmmakers that understand how to do CG and animation and world building and all that sort of thing. I think that what I would look for was somebody that is willing to be humble before the specific craft of how you make one of these films, because it's taken us, at this point, 15, 16 years to figure it out, and we're still learning day to day. So.
From the deep oceans of Titanic to the alien moons of Pandora, James Cameron has consistently shown us what it means to dream beyond the limits of technology, time, and even box office expectations. His career hasn't just been a masterclass in storytelling, it's been a relentless pursuit of scale, innovation, and immersion. And when you look at the numbers, the budgets, the risks, the returns, it becomes clear. James Cameron doesn't just make movies. He builds worlds that audiences are willing to visit again and again, no matter the cost. Whether it was the early struggles with Piranha 2 or the billion-dollar milestones of Avatar, every step in his journey has contributed to a legacy unlike any other. So as we close this chapter on Cameron's cinematic empire, one thing is certain. When he sets out to tell a story, he doesn't ask what's possible, he asks what's next. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments, which James Cameron film left the biggest mark on you? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one, as we explore the worlds of film, finance, and the people who changed the industry forever.